Welcome back, Nightmare Success In and Out listeners. Wow, do I have a treat today? I know you guys come here for what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. Well, Alec Burlakoff is my guest, and he is. It's a fascinating story. I was just watching another podcast. Justin Paperny actually turned me on to Alec, and it's. I mean, you could make a movie out of it, and they basically are. But this is a school guidance counselor that then turns into someone who generates over $3 billion worth of pharmaceutical sales in the drug industry. Alec was a senior VP at Insys Pharmaceuticals. You may have seen him on 60 Minutes. You may have read his book, Selling Hard Lessons Learned. There's a Netflix movie coming out in October, Pain Hustlers, about Alec and the fall of this billion-dollar company. And he helped actually contribute onto that movie. In the end of all this story, there was the founder and 6 other executives that were convicted in a very unique case. It's not really happened the way that this happened, reaching into the C-suite and pulling people out and putting them in prison. And the other interesting thing is Alec and I were just talking about this before he got on. He did his time while COVID was going on. And I just find that incredibly interesting because there's only so many different types of things that are certain freedoms you have in prison. And when they take those away, it gets really small. I can't wait to unpack all this with this fascinating story with Alec. Before we do that, I want to recognize our sponsor, Auto Plaza Direct. You know, who likes spending a couple of weekends walking the lots, car lots, looking for a car? Then you spend 4 or 5 hours at the dealership to buy a car. It's kind of like a trip to the dentist. Well, there's a better way to take care of all the pain and hassle of getting a car. It's called Auto Plaza Direct. They are your personal car concierge. You just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you. They'll negotiate your best price and deliver the car to you. They'll also offer you warranties and finance, all for full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge. The new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. Alec,
Yes.
how are you doing?
I'm well. How about you, Brian?
I'm doing good. Thanks so much for making the time to do this, Alec. I find your story absolutely fascinating because, you know, there's so many different layers to this because your dad and your brother were in the sales business, and you weren't. You went a totally opposite direction. You went into child psychology. You got a master's in that. Then you became a guidance counselor. And as the story goes, you were like, man, I want to catch up with dollars. I want to, get into something that can be something that I can relate back to what everybody else is doing. And you got into this big world, but it's not too far out of the realm because you had been a competitive guy all your life. It wasn't like all of a sudden you put on the Superman robe and said, okay, I'm Alex Burlakoff, and now I'm taking off. You were kind of already had it in your DNA. You just decided I'm taking off. And then when you took off, which is interesting, Alec, is you became, I think it was the Rookie of the Year with Eli Lilly right off the bat, which I had to be incredibly, I don't know. I would have been pretty enthusiastic about that if that was the new career I was going into. Going back into this, just sprinkling a little bit of that. Take us back to growing up as a kid. What was it like to be in Alec's life growing up?
I grew up, with mom and dad. They got divorced when I was in college, so I had mom and dad at home. For my elementary school years, my mom was a full-time stay-at-home mom. My dad was a workaholic. I had an older brother who had some very, very severe bipolar disorder and passed away in 2013. But, he and my brother and I were close, and we did what most kids did. We hung out, we played stickball, we played basketball, any other game that we could figure out. Obviously we weren't, I try to stay not home. I didn't like to be home, didn't like to have friends over. It was,
Yeah.
listen, I didn't have a bad life, but there was always yelling and screaming and fighting. My parents didn't have a good marriage, and with my brother's mental illness, there was stress in the family. But I think you think you talk openly enough to enough people, and you realize that that's pretty much in every
It
family.
happens. Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So
So one of the things I thought was interesting, you had sports and different things going on in your world. I think your dad was a big part of that in your world too. Um, but you got sick, like in junior high. Was that
I
the
got
time
sick
period?
actually the summer before my senior year in high school. Yeah, I got sick. Um,
And walk us through that because I think that played into where you went in your head in your life.
yeah, I mean, to be young and sick, I had a very severe bacterial infection called brucellosis that I think I caught spending my summer up in Connecticut that year. It's very difficult to diagnose and to be sick for 6 8 months before even getting diagnosed. And people will understand there are many people out there who've been sick and not diagnosed or misdiagnosed or told that there's nothing wrong with them. And at the age of 16, when all you want to do is go out and play ball with your friends,
Oh yeah, I can't
it,
imagine.
it's kind of hard to even imagine that, like, some doctors would be like, "You're fine, just go back," because the bacteria was just so rare. I think I was the first case diagnosed in 20 years. So,
What did you
uh,
feel like? What was the symptoms
uh,
of it?
just the worst flu you ever had, but it never
Oh,
ended. Just day after day, week
aching,
after week, month
joints.
after month, sweats, chills,
Yeah, that sounds terrible.
nausea, you're losing weight. There's something wrong with you. So it was a relief when I was eventually hospitalized. Had a team of doctors on my case, and they diagnosed me, and then it got worse before it gets better. Like many people know who are sick,
Yeah.
I had to take some serious antibiotics for a very long period of time, where I was convinced that I was only getting sicker. Although I was feeling sicker, my Brucella count was going way down, so I was getting better. But it took years to feel normal again.
So did it more or less you getting better happen all through your high school years?
So my whole senior year in high school was shot. I was on homebound. I didn't even go to school for the
Can't
majority.
imagine.
Yeah, and then I always wanted to go to school out of state. I went to high school in Florida, and then with me being sick and the doctors, and I didn't want to be too far away, so I went to school in state. Still 5.5 hours away from home. I went to Florida State University undergrad, but I came home a lot of weekends the first 2 years to see
Yeah.
doctors and try to get myself right. So you learn at an early age that you're not invincible, and that like something very very terrible could happen. You could die very quickly, but it shaped the way I thought. It was my first bout of mental illness, right?
Yeah.
Depression, being sick, and
Well, you
anxiety.
talk about depression because you talk about a couple of things, Alec, that I think is interesting. You really talk about your dad was a big presence in your life. And that's not unusual. We were just talking about that my
Yeah.
dad was a huge presence in my life. Uh, how did that all play out for you as you were growing up? Because as a divorced home, uh, and being who you were, how did that play for you?
With regards to just my parents' roles,
Yeah, and how he played into your life, and
yeah,
because
I mean, yeah, your dad is your everything. I mean, I had an older brother also to mentor me, but he was already mentored and molded into my father. So I got a double dose,
sure,
Um, and I because I wasn't the sales guy and so forth at the dinner table, I was just a listener. I was an observer. The conversation was between my brother and my father. What deals were made, how the deals were closed, what were the logistics of the deal, and so I was exposed to this my
because they were
whole
in the
life.
car business,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. My dad started in the printing business
Yeah,
before all of that just became obsolete, and then he came down here. We moved down here in Florida on a whim. He didn't have a job, he didn't have anything, and was trying to make ends meet, figure out what to do, and eventually he took a car on the lot, and then was promoted 5 times to GM. And my brother did the same thing, in, far less time. I mean, there's sales ability in the family. The
Comes
problem,
into the DNA. But I
yeah,
think what I think's interesting about all that is that it probably was in your DNA from the beginning, but your dad didn't really want you to go that way.
not at
I mean,
all.
did you go into child psychology because you could feel him pushing you into that, or was that something you just naturally wanted to do and go the opposite direction of the sales?
More that I wanted to go the opposite direction of sales. I loathed it. I thought it sounded like hell and a lot of pressure.
Well, it is hell sometimes.
Right? And
Yeah,
and I'll be selling the rest of my life and on my own because
yeah.
as a convicted felon, you're not getting the big public company hiring you for a salary. Those days are over.
Those days are over, right? We got to be
Over.
really, really creative
Yeah.
and be
But
able to tell your story.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and really, quite frankly, do what I love to do and what I'm
yeah.
best at. I mean, what made me successful, in sales was my ability to speak and get people to listen and follow. So now the question is, what am I saying? Because people are going to follow, and it's going to be the right message. Which, unfortunately, that wasn't the case in the Insys scenario.
Well, let's talk about that because let's walk through it a little bit, Alec, because you were living a normal, whatever normal is. You were a coach, a guidance counselor at school. Um, what what gave you the launch to jump?
Well, first of all, I worked at I had a couple of jobs throughout my preceptorships as an intern and so forth. But my first real job as a guidance counselor was at an affluent private school. I was surrounded by people with crazy,
Had
crazy,
money. Yeah.
and some of them were very nice and kind and tried to mentor me and help me and guide me. And one specifically said, "I do not see you doing this. Like, what are you going to do with your life?"
Hmm.
Uh, and he was actually one of the people instrumental in getting me an interview with Eli Lilly. Um, but the the being around the money and getting to an age where I'm no longer like 21, 22, 23, but I'm starting to be around 30-year-olds and I'm seeing all the money they have and the way they talk and the way they act, and the way they dress. It all started to mold me. And then being at the school and seeing these parents with this crazy money, it got to me, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Um, and
Makes sense.
the straw that broke the camel's back was, I had to monitor the carpool lane after school, and we had a guy smoking a cigar in a Bentley convertible. I went out there and said, "Hey, would you mind kindly putting the cigar out?" He took another puff, blew it in my face, and said, "Petty rules from petty people." You know,
Oh, wow.
um, and I'm talking to you about that today because I'll never forget it, and
Yeah.
it
Stuck
drove
with you.
me for a long, long time. But now I realize at this point in my life, I can't let shit like that. I just got to go through one ear and right out the other,
Yeah.
because it's completely counterproductive, you know?
Well, and plus what you've experienced. You've
Yeah.
experienced all the highs and lows, so you know when somebody says that it's pretty what do we call that? I don't know.
It's apropos. First of all, I mean, it's expected. It is what it is.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a
you know,
stereotype.
I was talking with my girlfriend last night, and I was just saying, like, putting myself out here like this, you see, you're gonna get comments, and
Oh
they're
yeah,
not all gonna be positive, you
yeah,
know. And I said to her, I said, "Listen, I can choose to bury my head in the sand, like the other six, which I completely respect. I have no
yeah.
qualms, I don't question their motives. But for me, even though I've changed and prison's changed me and my experience changed me, in here, there's something still in here that says, Alec, that's not who you are.
Well, and it's funny you say that, Alec, because I had the exact same kind of conversation with my wife. We're walking the dog. I've got my book coming out. This is a couple of years ago, and I said, I think I'm going to do a podcast. And she says, "Oh my goodness." She said, "What?
Right.
What are you going to do?" Because Julie truly, I think, would have liked me just to be the guy that was walking the dogs in the neighborhood and living that silent life.
Right.
And she said, "Why can't you do that, Brent?" And I said, I'm just Julie, you've known me since I was 15 years old. I'm just not wired that way. I feel like I've got to go out and make a difference. And how I make a difference is different than maybe what somebody else might do.
Mhm.
And, but I can tell you this because I was having a conversation with somebody the other day. By doing that, it's been the most liberating thing I've ever done because it takes all the power away from the person when you walk into the room. If I'm out in front of who I am and I've gone to prison and I've done what I've done and I've got my whole experience, they can't use that against me. I've already exposed it out there. That's a
Right.
disabler, and I would rather that than wonder when I walk into there. I wonder if Alec knows.
Right.
I wonder if Stu knows. I wonder.
Right.
I don't like that. It's just better for me as a person, and I'm not belittling anybody that's not the other way. It's just easier for me to move that way.
100%. Yeah. It's again, for me, it wasn't an option, you know.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be an option, but I quickly realized it was never going to be an option for me. So why
Well,
continue to fight?
let's go back in, Alec. Let's talk about how it happened because
Sure.
you start walking into being immediately, more or less, a guy that knows his way around sales. You start winning awards. Um, you move through a couple of different companies, big companies. We're not talking about little companies, Johnson and Johnson, and big companies that you're rolling through, and then you come to your final company. Tell us about that.
Well, the final company, it's just amazing how life works, and everybody can relate to this. You just never know. I was out of pharmaceuticals. I
Yeah,
left.
I want to talk about that because you had a 5 year stint. What did you do in those 5 years that you
I was
were
I
out?
was the director of business development for sleep laboratories. So we ran
Okay,
diagnostic tests for sleep disorders. Obviously, the most common one being obstructive sleep
sleep apnea
apnea.
and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I worked for the owner. I ran 5 to 7 labs. Um, totally like people like, oh, that sounds like you're still in pharmaceuticals. Totally, totally different. Talking about a tiny company with 7 labs in Florida. Um, and I was making a nice salary, no commission, no bonus, living the life that most people would really, really want to live. And interestingly enough, at some point during that 5 year stint, the owner said to me, Medicare is cutting the reimbursement rates of of sleep apnea
Mhm.
significantly. He's like, I'm gonna have to like cut your pay significantly.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I get it. I'm like, listen, you've been good to me. We've been through this for years. Like, you never know what's going to happen with the Medicare and the reimbursement. Um, I said, but would you be opposed to me entertaining, an additional job, to
Mhm.
make up for the difference? He said, not at all. Um, while that was going on, I got a call from Matt Napolitano, the vice president of marketing at Insys. He used to work with me at Cephalon. And he said, we're just launching this new drug. It's, we just started. We got a VP here. We're not happy with them. Are you interested?
Mhm.
And I said, what are we talking about? He says, right now, just be a manager in Florida. I said, that's perfect. I work in Florida. I can do
That's
both
where I
jobs.
live.
Yeah,
Right.
I can do both jobs at the same time. I
Yeah.
can I can do the pharmaceutical job, literally. It, this is what
With my
people
hands tied behind my back. Right.
pharmaceuticals is not a hard job.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's not a sales job.
Yeah.
There's maybe 2% of every company that are true salespeople and conduct themselves accordingly, but pharmaceutical sales is the biggest cush job in the world, and people are spoiled rotten, and all they do is complain why they don't make more money. Um, so I never had a lot of respect for pharmaceuticals. So I worked in it many many years, but quite frankly, I despised everything about it. So
Well,
when
and I want to go back into Alec because in your world where you were at that point, are you married? Do you have kids? Are you rich because you've done all these things and become successful in your job? What's going on in your personal life?
before I went to Insys,
Yeah.
um, I am I'm exactly where someone would want to be at that age. I mean, no, I'm not rich, but I'm very comfortable.
Okay.
Um, I have a house paid for in cash, a modest house,
Hmm.
modest neighborhood. We drive nice cars.
Yeah.
We go out to eat. Do we travel all over the country? And do we go spending thousands of dollars shopping. No, we don't have that kind of. But I
Okay.
had a nice life, and I had an easy job. I mean, I
And
work
you
hard.
got girls, right? You had
Uh,
two daughters. Is that
Two
correct?
daughters, yeah,
Okay. I
yeah,
have three daughters, so
yeah.
we're very much in relation to that.
My two little girls, and I was home every night and wasn't traveling anymore, which I was, prior to that when
Sure.
I was in pharma.
Yeah.
And then, I just literally, when I talked to Matt and then I talked to the CEO and the owner, I gave them the most arrogant, cocky questions a man could ever ask. Because I'm like, I'm not
Had you
taking,
ever met Kapoor before?
no,
Okay.
no. And I'm like, I'm not taking this job unless it's
Kapoor being the
literally.
CEO of the new company.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Kapoor is the executive chairman, founder of the board. Mike Babbage was the CEO.
Yeah.
Hadn't met either one of them. But
Right.
anyway, I went out there and I just asked them like off the wall crazy questions, and they're like, "It's your show, whatever you want to do," And I ran it accordingly, and I was convinced, in 15 years of pharmaceuticals, that if I could run the show and call my own shots,
You could
um,
do it.
I'm gonna freaking do something that nobody's ever done in their life. That's how I've always felt.
Okay. So did you know at that time, walking into that interview and then kind of doing your research about it, that the founder of the company wasn't really happy with his investment and he wanted a bigger return and he was looking for uh, better sales?
Yeah, by that time, I also already knew that the vice president of sales, who did not know at the time, was going to be replaced.
Okay.
Didn't know it was going to be replaced by me, but knew that it was a possibility if I came in and performed in a quick period of time.
Because they were after bigger sales.
That's all. Yeah, it was go for broke, whatever
Yeah.
it takes.
And this wasn't Kapoor's first rodeo. He'd been in several different companies. It was this company that he was really looking at, that he didn't feel like the sales were performing the way that he planned on it through his ROI and his projections, and he was looking for a better way, somebody to come in and kind of save the day and build some new sales.
And I will say, at the beginning, his disappointment was absolutely warranted and realistic. I mean, the company was going to go under. It wasn't like we were doing okay. And you could say, hey, we just started, we're building momentum, things are projecting in the right direction. No, it was horrible.
Right.
So I also knew that, if I was going to
Was
take
that part of the intrigue for you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I'm just going to do a complete 180 on this thing,
Mhm.
and, I made some crazy, bold decisions that I made as a child and as a teen my whole life and had always prospered in. But this time, those crazy decisions in the big boys world, specifically the federal government, right, Department of Justice, no
All
good.
right. Well, let's talk about the decisions, because I've been all around in doing research. Tell us about what happened.
Well, I mean, for example, my entire career in pharmaceuticals, although I had a college degree and a master's, it annoyed the hell out of me that people in pharmaceuticals seem to have their nose up in the air because they had this college degree and thought that they were like in the elite of all elite.
Running with professionals.
Yeah, exactly. And although they're right, they should pat themselves on the back for their education and so forth and so on, and their A's and their biochemistry degrees, which I didn't have any of that. They're not good salespeople.
Yeah.
90% of them are not good salespeople. And I came to the conclusion, within a couple of months at Eli Lilly, that this isn't about helping patients and saving patients' lives. There may be a department somewhere in the company where there's 3 people sitting behind a desk. Maybe the guy's in R&D, right? Research and development. But we all know sales drives companies.
Mhm.
This guy was planning on going public from day one. So I hired salespeople. If somebody came across my desk and they happen to have a college degree or a master's, great. But if they
Right.
couldn't, I'm not hiring. And so I went above and beyond. I started to think back to the people that I went to school with, from my childhood, from college, that are some of the best salespeople that I've ever seen in my life. Not because I've watched them or observed them in pharmaceuticals, but because I've seen them in a bar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean,
Such a good point, Alec. Because
yeah,
we had 400 or 500 people that were salespeople, and that person who can tell a really good story and it
yeah,
brings everybody in, and they play the movie in their head while they're telling the story. That's a good salesperson.
yeah. I mean, I got a guy sticking out in my mind right now. This guy's, there's certain people you don't forget.
Yeah.
But one of them I took with me. I took him to Eli Lilly with me.
Yeah.
Took him to Cephalon with me, and then I took him to Insys with me. He wanted to be a manager. All three
Yeah.
companies, he never made manager. But in Insys, I brought him in as a rep. I promoted him to a manager, and then I promoted him again to a director. One of my best friends in the world. I mean, I lost a brother to death, and then I lost a brother to this because we got wrapped up in this fiasco. Um, and we'll never speak again. And you get that. You've been
No,
there.
that's sad.
You lose good people in
I
your life.
feel that for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. But it was just, it's always about the bottom line in sales. And so I hired people with no degrees. And the human resource manager, who didn't even have a master's at the time, she's like, "You don't have a college degree." And I'm like, "But who said you need a college degree to sell?"
Right.
And it was kind of like, "Yeah, but in pharmaceuticals, that's usually the criteria." I'm like, "But we don't even have a compliance department. We don't have a legal department. You're the HR manager. You don't even have a master's. Like I, I'm gonna have
So
a
you decided to go in there and build the world the way that you saw it,
completely different than what I'd ever seen in my life.
the way
And
you
then,
wanted it.
yeah, and all I had to do with Kapoor was I'd say, "John, listen, I got to hire. There's somebody I want to hire. He doesn't have a college degree." And he said, "Can he sell?" And
Yeah.
I said, "100
So he
percent."
understood.
He understood. In that regard, he understood. Unfortunately, my decisions got bolder and bolder.
But I want to go back to this, Alec,
Yeah,
because one of the things I noticed, I can't remember where it came
yeah,
up, but the meetings that you guys had, and these were hardcore, calling people out meetings that people are taking notes, and the founder or the CEOs, he's saying this is the way. Uh, what what was going through your mind in those type of meetings? Were you thinking, holy shit, I got to get this thing really rolling, or these guys are really getting what I'm doing, and I just got to do more of it? What was going on in those meetings with
funny.
your head?
Either of the two. Um, sometimes I let it get to me. First of all, by the time I got to the meeting, I was high, stoned out of my mind, because I knew I was going into the 8:30 with Kapoor, and I got to just
Mhm.
freaking keep my cool. Um, but I got to a point. I mean, sales were so good. I mean, we were doing amazing things. I got to a point, quite frankly, where I just didn't. There was a while where I didn't care. I mean, you gotta eventually begin to tune this guy out. I mean,
Because you were safe, you were winning the numbers.
I was killing it. I mean, it's undebatable,
Okay, well
and
let's talk about, because when we're talking about winning the numbers, one of the things you did is creating this world of billions of dollars of sales. You had this speakers bureau. And I thought one of the things that was interesting about the Speakers Bureau, and I think it was when you were with Justin talking, is it wasn't easy to find these guys. You had to do some deep research, really kind of go to school and study these doctors. But when you brought them in and said, "Hey, listen, we're going to give you speaker fees, and you're gonna prescribe drugs for us. Is that good?" You said maybe less than 1 out of 10 would agree to that.
correct. Yeah, I mean, how many doctors are in the country? I can tell you that we uncovered every stone, went to every cities that you've never even heard of in the middle of nowhere. And in my book, others will say there were more, but in my book, we found 20.
Well, and
So,
but you kind of knew who that was. They had a profile where the people were standing outside. There was you found the thing in the government where you could use their profile of who prescribed what, how often, all those different things that were red flags for you guys in a way, for sales ways, that I thought was interesting. Use data that was already there that you could profile.
Well, yeah, that data is there, and it's accessible to anyone. You know, we pay for it. I believe it's called IMS. But yeah, you're right. The doctors that clearly would have risen a red flag to the government are the doctors that clearly raised a green flag to us. The path of least resistance. But you know, it took even more than that. I mean, just because you go to an office where there's a line around the corner and clearly it's a pill mill doesn't mean that doctor is going to
Is
take
going to take
money
it.
from you. You
Yeah.
know, even when we did our extensive research, you know, and we pre-qualified and so forth before I went out there or one of the directors or managers to have that conversation, you know, it could still blow up in your face. You could be fully prepared for an exam and literally, you know, in the middle of the dinner, he walks out or you tell him, listen, let me take care of the tab. I'll leave. Hey, enjoy your dinner, you know?
But Alec, it wasn't a lot of money that you were getting given for these fake speaker fees. I mean, it was money, but doctors make a lot of money. But you know,
Yeah, you raise a good point. So it's all relative and you got to take this into consideration when you're doing your analysis. Again, we're trying to look, we're looking for divorce doctors who are trying to hide money, to pay them in a different name. We're
mhm.
looking for doctors who, you know, are introverts and single and they never go out ever.
Mhm.
And the money is just an added bonus to the camaraderie and socialization and the bottle service and the VIP. You got to do all of the above. But also, you have to be cognizant of where this model will work.
Mhm.
So, and because you got to, right, you only have so much money. The doctors that were targeted were primary care physicians,
Okay.
general
Makes sense.
practitioners, internal medicine. The average salary, and someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but because it's been a while, I've been out of the game. But the average salary is like 150,000 for a primary care physician. If you can add another 200,000 to
It's a
that,
big deal. Yeah.
now you
It's
got
a
something.
different lifestyle.
Now, if you call on a plastic surgeon or an orthopedic surgeon or, you know, even a dermatologist, for them, it's probably not worth it,
Right.
right? So, so again, that's all part of that targeting
All the
exercise,
research. Yeah.
right? Even if oncologists prescribed pain meds for cancer, which most don't, for
Mhm.
very good reasons. One, they don't want to give the patient the idea or the notion that they've given up on them and they're just treating them for pain. And two, they want to treat the tumor, right?
Yeah.
But calling on oncologists, again, they're in a different bracket financially. So you're right. To them, it's not a lot of money, but to the doctors we were targeting, it was plenty.
Okay. So talking about money, I thought it was interesting that you just volunteered when you were talking to Justin that you had this gambling thing. And I I didn't find it anywhere else, but you talked about it and with you were talking with Justin. Did that play into anything that you like, or is that just you? That's just you play on the edge and you like to push it to the edge, and gambling is part of where your adrenaline goes, or did that play into how you were playing your world?
I mean, I think that, you know, a compulsive gambler, um, you know, loves the adrenaline rush and loves the risk taking and gambles in all aspects of their
Which
life.
sales is a great place to do that.
A good place
Yeah.
to do it. Now, you know, it's interesting. I gambled in some of my decisions. I thought they were calculated risk, you know, hiring people without a college degree. I mean, I hired an ex-felon. I hired an ex-felon who
Yeah.
literally had a felony for selling
Well, they
marijuana.
can sell.
I said to myself, if this guy can make money selling marijuana and ran his
Yeah,
own business, he's going to be great in
exactly. Well,
pharmaceutical.
and that's the thing I found fascinating. I had a guy, Stroby, who I lived with for a year and a half at Leavenworth, unbelievably smart on his setup, with the whole string of, distribution
Right.
and incentives and the whole play out of how the earn in happened. These guys were doing it. They were operating a big company that was layered. They just weren't doing it on the legal side.
Right. Right. I mean, and you know, my boldest decision, which, you know, I'll never live down, was I hired a stripper, you know.
Yeah.
I was entertaining physicians in an adult entertainment club, strip club, and I met her. Of course, she sat down and did her thing and was talking. And I had just accepted the role for vice president. My manager in Chicago, I knew I was getting rid of her. She lived in Michigan. And I'm like, I'll tell you what, get dressed up tomorrow. Meet me at Starbucks. Let me see if you can
So,
look the part and make it
yeah,
through the interview process without embarrassing me.
yeah.
And she did it. And I gave her the job. And, every night I went to bed, I'm like,
Was she good?
phenomenal.
Well,
Phenomenal.
why is that a bad thing? If
Well,
she was good at if she was good at selling, I mean, it's the old story of, the strippers working their way through college and trying to get,
which is what she was
but
doing, which is
yeah.
what she
So,
was doing.
but I'm just saying, who's to say that a stripper can't be an incredible salesperson that can make good money?
Well, I told Kapoor she was a stripper, and he said that's fine. He's like, "Is she done?
Can't you sell?
Can't she sell?" So, but people are outraged by that. People are
Well,
disgusted by that.
sure.
And I have to accept that and acknowledge that. And I guess maybe just at my age, at this point in my life, maybe decisions like that, risk taking behaviors, and so forth. You got to grow up. And um, there's a part of me who thinks that I'll never be anywhere even remotely close to as successful as I was in the past because I don't have that edge anymore to take those risks and
Yeah.
make bold decisions.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. I don't want it. I want peace and happiness in my life. I want moderation. I want to
Yeah.
make a living, but I don't need to be like successful like that.
Yeah, no, and I think, when in talking to Justin when he was telling me about you went and did a speaking deal at USC, and I can see you being that guy that can get out and convert people to understand and learn things by what you've been through, and that fills you up quite a bit. I've been able to do that at colleges and speak, and I it feels like what I was doing as a CEO and as an owner,
Right?
and that
Yeah.
feeling is if you can get that back, that's a
Yeah.
big deal. It doesn't matter about money. It has to do how does it make you feel?
100%. And a lot of people don't understand that. I've tried to explain that to others because even people now are so like, again, it's about money. And I'm like, no,
It's not
it's
about
about the,
money.
it's about the other things that
Yeah.
I'm missing.
Well, especially if you've hit, and you and I can back up to this. When you are sitting there and you realize that everything that you had in your life, and it was a great life, you're at a plastic chair, a bunk bed, and a locker, and you
Right.
can adapt to that. When you get out, I think there's somewhat of a liberating feeling is I can do that. If I can do that, I can pretty much do anything. I might be a little bit scared of what you're presenting me, but I know I can do it because I've adapted to pretty much anything.
Yeah. I think about that every day, and just recently getting off probation and getting in my car and not, having that weight lifted off my shoulders. You don't get out of prison. You're not trying to brag. There's nothing to brag about.
Nothing to brag about.
Right. Although I will tell you that I do have a tremendous amount of respect, as odd as that says, for those guys that have been there for years and years.
Absolutely.
And the way in
Without a
which they
doubt.
do their time, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And the little things that I picked up and learned. I don't condone what they did to get in there. I'm just simply saying what they're doing now is to me it was very impressive.
Well, Alec, going back, because you're building all this up, you've got the sales going, everything's happening as you want it to happen. You're making a name for yourself, a bigger name for yourself. You were already a name for yourself in the business. When things start coming down on you, is it a surprise or, is it a knock down the door? Holy shit, this is the FBI, or were you feeling it?
I was feeling it. I had to feel it because there was an investigative reporter, this guy Roddy Boyd, um, that had written like a piece or two and then reached out to me. I had been in pharmaceuticals before at lower levels, but was very aware that these things are pretty commonplace.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were the first pharmaceutical executives ever to be put, in prison.
Yeah, it
Um,
was one of a kind, really.
yeah. So I thought that I kept trying to tell myself, I don't like this. I don't want to be a part of this. But this comes with the territory. This is part of it. Be a
Part of the
man.
job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man. Like don't waver. Keep moving forward.
Plus, you're the leader.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be the leader. So And I told myself that every day, and I did it. I did it right to the end. But I even made a speech at a national sales meeting that was quite controversial. Just around making sure that nobody had any questions or concerns or doubts
Mhm.
with the company and the standing. But yeah, so I felt it, and then I read a couple articles where a doctor got in trouble because his patient died, not on substance alone, but on a plethora of medication, substance being
Mhm.
one of them. And I'm like, oh, this can't be good. And then,
Mhm.
then another doctor got arrested for multiple things, one of which overprescribing substance. So yeah, I felt it.
It started closing in.
Yeah.
So when it did close in, Alec, what happened?
So I mean, first I got a civil attorney, to handle all that. He was representing a group of us, and then my civil attorney
I'm
called.
sure he got scared off immediately when he found out that it could go criminal.
Yeah, he called me right away, and
Yeah.
he said, I can't represent you anymore. You got to get a criminal attorney. You're a person of interest. Moving to a subject any day. And I'm in California doing business. And at that point, I was like, yeah,
Well, I mean, a person of interest is one thing. Moving to a subject or a target, well, subject and target is pretty much the same thing.
and
It's
that's
just,
what I understand. That once you're a
yeah,
subject, you're pretty much going
you
to
are a
target.
target.
You're
Yeah.
done. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
The target
um,
means indicted, and,
yeah,
and
yeah,
once indicted, you are
you cooked.
tagged and cooked.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, I got the news in California, and I was like, listen, not feeling good. Went back to my hotel, called our in-house attorney, who we finally had one at the time, and started looking for attorneys. And had an attorney and continued to work at Insys for an extended period of time.
What's going through your mind though when you think it's going criminal? Is it these things could work out, or because you haven't been in this?
Never.
What do you what's are you like thinking, waking up with it, going to bed with it?
Um, I was I was still sleeping and eating, so I wasn't that bad because I got to that point. But
Yeah.
no, I was functioning.
Family,
Um,
what do they know anything?
I told my wife,
Okay.
and
What's
uh,
she think?
it's my ex-wife now.
Yeah.
It's been too much, right? But I don't think she knew what to think. She's just shaking her head, and I mean, she's been around me long enough to know that pharmaceutical companies get sued all the time and pay
Sure.
hundreds of millions in fines. And I
Yeah.
said, I'm sure it'll go that way.
Yeah.
But once I got that criminal attorney thing, everything changed. And
It does. Once you get the criminal attorney, it gets a slippery slope. So the criminal attorney probably comes back to you and says, "Hey, Alec, I went and talked to him. Here's the deal."
mhm.
That's usually the way it happens.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't want to continue in Insys. I wanted to be done. I
yeah.
resigned like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Finally, the last time, I stayed on as a consultant for a couple months, but
Mhm.
you know, I wanted to separate myself from them as far as I possibly could, even though I was
Yeah.
completely, uh, you know, guilty in the whole thing. But I still just wanted. I'm like, get me away from these people. Um, they didn't want me to go at that point because even after all that, clearly sales were still.
They're still wanting sales.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you would think they'd be like, "There's the door. Like,
Yeah.
you're the perfect scapegoat, head of sales.
Yeah.
Goodbye."
They were
That
addicted to it
no, they won't
and
because
needed it.
we had another drug that was getting launched, and they said,
Okay.
"Tell you what, just stay on for the launch of the new
And
drug."
and the drug that you guys had, it was a fentanyl spray, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I thought. And all these things are very common, but people don't think of them as common. But like in the cancer universe, like there's the lollipop, the fentanyl lollipop. There's all these different things, but your founder came up with a fentanyl spray that made it easy to intake and all those different things. But um, interesting how all that comes to
yeah, and the
us.
product. I mean, there's like 6 or 7 products in the class. One's a nasal spray. One goes between the cheek and gum. One's the lollipop. One's underneath the tongue. honestly, man, it's six and one half dozen the other.
Yeah.
He liked to think that he came out with the greatest product on the state
Yeah,
of.
I read about that. He was like he was the big inventor of and it was an invention of the spray of that. I mean, there wasn't
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you could sell that because
I
it was
sold
one
it.
of that.
I mean, listen, we sold it, right? I mean, you don't have to actively administer the tablet. You
Sure.
don't have the
Yeah. No, I read
lollipops.
up on it. Yeah.
You know,
Makes
this,
sense. I get it.
kids could get a hold of the lollipop. I mean, there's something
So
I
many
can,
different things. Yeah.
yeah, I can blunt any other product, but that's not the point. The point is
How, how long
everything
did it
around.
last for you, Alec, when um, they say, you know what, Alex, the guy at the top of the chain here is selling, we're going to indict him? And how long did all this last for you?
Well, I mean, I got indicted in 2016. I didn't go in until 2020.
Yeah.
4 years knowing you're going to prison, wondering what the heck you're going to do now, then, and after.
Isn't it a weird life to live in limbo like that? I went for 6 years, and
It's
I
crazy.
went pre-trial for 3, and
Yeah.
it's a very strange, and you can't talk to anybody about it unless you have somebody that, maybe you talk to Jason and Mike or Justin and Michael about that, but mostly you don't have anybody to talk to. You're on your own island, and you want to talk to people, but you don't want to freak them out either.
Correct. Yeah. Um,
It's a dark place.
it's a very dark place. I had kids, so if they needed a ride somewhere, I took them for a ride. If they needed to go to the mall to pick some up, if they needed to go to the drugstore, if they wanted to go for ice cream. Like I just did what
How old would they have been when you were doing this in those 4 years? Your girls?
like 15 and 7.
Yeah, I had teenagers, so it's about the same. Oh, not
Yeah.
7, but teenagers. Yeah.
And my 7-year-old tells me that she doesn't remember life, before daddy's
Good.
going to prison,
Yeah.
which is horrible. But listen, we talk about that, but for me personally, um, it, this isn't about my negative experience. It's about the negative experience that I put out there, based on my efforts to others. That is something that I gotta live for. I gotta live with, and but I also have to
No, I
no,
think you bring up a good point, Alec, because it's the experience that we go through is excruciatingly. It's an unbelievably humbling experience.
humbling. Yeah.
There's no way to get more humbled than to go through processing as a prisoner, to get prisonized and enter the world that you don't know, but you have to live in. How did you handle that world?
Uh I mean, I listen, when I first got there, I had to go through to quarantine, which was basically the shoe.
Solitary, yeah.
Yeah. And by yourself, obviously.
Not a very big room.
Small, small. No mirror. You're supposed to get a welcome kit when you get to prison. A welcome kit is a toothbrush and a razor, maybe a bar of soap. I can't remember. I didn't get that for 2 weeks. They just kept forgetting. I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, it
How
was
long are you in this solitary, the SHU?
4 weeks.
Special housing unit is what SHU stands for, and a lot of the prisoners just call it the hole.
And you think you're going to the minimum security, and for 4 years, people are telling you, oh, it's not going to be that bad. You're going to a minimum. And then, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to the SHU. Like, there are people who go through their entire prison life without ever having been in solitary. And
well, Alec, I want you brought up a really good point, because here's the weird thing about going to prison and processing through. You went directly to the SHU. When I went in, you processed at the big, ugly 1879. That's how old the building is. And they process you through this basement, and they put you in the cell, and you just sit there. And you sit there for a long time. You sit there like 4 or 5 hours, and your mind, if you're not ever put in a situation like that, you can't really talk. But if you're put in a situation like that, you're like, I wonder if this is just where they're putting me. I wonder if this is just going to be where I'm going to be for the next 3 to 5 years
right
here, because what in the world am I going to say to them? I'm not supposed to be here.
Right.
I mean, nobody and everybody would say that. So your mind just goes into like this weird. I started doing push-ups and walking around, and finally they came and got me, and then they processed me and did all the stuff that they do to you, the kind of dehumanize. And then I ended up back and going in this van down to this place that I originally thought I was supposed to go to. But for those 4 or 5 hours of thinking this could be my life for 4 or 5 years, that's a big thought.
Yeah, and I had very similar thoughts, and you don't. I mean, I spent the entire time in the shoot just thinking, I just got to get out of here. I just got to
get out of here.
That's my first goal. And when I did get to the actual minimum.
What'd you do in there, Alec? That time you were in there? Yeah.
I mean, I tried to do push-ups also and sit-ups. I tried to run in place, but I didn't have any success. Like I couldn't do it. I just my brain was so dull.
Filled up. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I was losing my cognitive ability. People are in there, for 9 months. I know people have been there.
They come out looking different.
Not just looking different, but they are different.
They act different.
I think that.
How long were you in there?
4 weeks going in, 4 weeks coming out.
That's a long time. I got a friend of mine that went in that way during your time, and he wasn't in that long, but he was in. I mean, he didn't do time that long, but those 6 to 8 weeks that he had to do solitary, it changed his life.
Yeah, I mean, just little things like if I'm going to bed, that door's got to be open. Like I went to the doctor's office, they put me in an exam room, closed the door. I sat there for like 10 minutes. I got up.
I gotta get out of here.
I opened the door. She said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yeah. I'm not sitting in here with the door closed. I'll sit outside in the waiting room. And you call me when the doctor's ready. It's no big deal."
Yeah.
But these little things that you never even thought of all of a sudden are coming to fruition, and you're like, "Oh yeah, there's been some change."
Yeah, and I had the same thing happen with Alec. We had a dog that my Stanley, who's a black lab, he ate some latex gloves, and we had to cut it out of him. And we went into that small little room there, and we had to wait forever. And I told Tony, I said, I don't feel good in here.
Really?
This isn't feeling right. This little room that we're closed in on. I've got this feeling that I got to get out of here.
Yeah, and
I didn't have that before.
Right. And when you're the type of guy that doesn't know if you have it or you don't, and all of a sudden you're in a cell and you don't know what time it is. You only know, by the meals, and breakfast comes like, I don't know, 4:30.
Well, the weird thing is, Alec, you were the guy calling the shot. So that's why I say it's so humbling, is that you go from a world of calling the shots, going through the world of being indicted. I mean, it levels down, but once you get to that point, you realize you don't have any control anymore. And that's an adjustment into a whole new world. Once you entered into your world of being in the prison, how'd you adapt and adjust to that? What was it like?
I mean, all things considered, I adapted pretty good. I mean, honestly, I felt like I died and went to heaven when I got out of solitary.
I bet.
That was the only positive. All of a sudden, I'm walking around. I see people. I hear voices.
Yeah.
I feel normal again. Like, initially, I just pretty much spent all my time, on my bed, until I got my job. And, you're told.
What kind of job did you do?
I worked outside, did gardening and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was hot as hell.
Where were you? Where'd you go?
Miami.
Miami. It would have been hot as hell. Yeah.
Hot, and then one guy gave me a radio, and you're told before you go into prison, don't take anything from anybody.
Yeah.
And I said no to the guy like 10 times. And he was just an enormous man. Like there's two guys like in every dorm that kind of run it. You know that. Yeah. He was one of those two guys. He's like, listen, man. He's like, it's okay.
Take it. And, that is such bad advice, because once you get in there, you realize that there's really good people that want to help you. I mean, I had Big Watson that was next to me, and he said, I'm giving you these shower shoes because I don't want any side bunkie that smells. And
Right.
I didn't even know how important those shower shoes were at the time they gave them to me. The very first hour I was there,
Me too.
and you know, I was told that too. That don't take anything. People are
Yeah.
going to use you. Man, there are so many guys that just want you to get through because you're living in their world. They identify with you coming in new. I mean, one of the things they do is they do look at the new guy coming in and size him up and see if he's,
Yeah.
who he
I
is.
mean, literally within the first hour, I had a pair of sweatpants, I had a sweatshirt,
Big deal.
I had sneakers. They were like 3 sizes too big, but I was so freaking happy.
Mine were
Um,
too small.
yeah,
I
whatever.
don't know which is better.
Yeah, and it was like 3 months before I could finally, get sneakers at the commissary. It was like,
Yeah.
the craziest things, little things that you don't even think about, adding up your grocery list manually.
Well, you got
You
to
know,
be, yeah, actually, to me, I had to be shown how to do that because it was, to me, my mind was just like scrambled. Like I'm confused. How do you fill this thing out?
me too. And again, after coming out of the solitary, um, I was having a hard time just getting my thoughts together and thinking. The whole time I was solitary, they give you that long code for your phone. I kept trying to memorize it. No matter what I did, I couldn't memorize it. I mean, it
Yeah.
just your brain really can
Well,
get.
I want to explain that because
Yeah.
that is one of the things that happens. Like when you have in prison, you can go to a computer and you put your thumb on the computer, and that's actually easier because it'll like let you in to be able to type. And I think it's like 5 cents a minute. But when you make a call, you have to rattle off your, I think it's a pack number is what they call it.
Yeah,
And when you're new, that's a big deal because this pack number is like comes out of a computer and you've got to recite that thing before you can ever talk to anybody on the outside world. And I remember thinking when I first got there, probably you too, Alec, is I got to figure this stuff out. I want to talk to the outside world. I want to be, but I've got to figure it out because it's not easy.
right. You got to set up the email, you got to set up the phone. But I'm telling you, the weeks while I was in there, I couldn't get that number down. I'm like, I'm losing my mind. I can't remember one number. I was a long number. It is a long number.
It is a long number, but
Like,
I'll do you one better. I couldn't, when they asked me in the gate in this big cage I was in, going into this ugly looking prison to be processed, they asked me my social security number. I couldn't remember it. And they said, you can't fucking remember your social security. I said, I don't think I can. I
yeah,
don't really think I can.
yeah. I mean, listen, I remember when I first got there, I got processed. He's walking me over. He goes, "You know where you're going?" I said, "Sir, I was told I'm going to the minimum." He goes, "You are." He's like, "But you're going to the shoot first." I
Yeah.
was like, the sweat already started coming down.
Yeah.
Then he says to me, "Hey man, can you fight?" So I tried to give him the politically correct answer, and I said, "I think I can handle myself." I said, "But my goal here is to, avoid,
Sure.
confrontation
Any
whatsoever."
confrontation.
He
Right.
goes, "Yeah, that's good, but it'd be better if you could fight." You know? So it's just like, that's the mentality. That's
Oh
the
no,
way
it
it
scares
is.
it's scary thoughts because
Yeah.
you're entering into an unknown world. And your world was different than my world because you went into a COVID world, and there's never a good time to go into prison. But I think the worst time to go into prison in the United States is in COVID because everybody got locked down,
Yeah.
whether you were in prison or not. In prison, you lock people down in prison and converge that world into a smaller world. That's a whole different way to do prison.
Yeah.
What did
100%.
you start thinking, Alec, when you were getting close to the door? You're getting close to getting out. Um, what are you thinking about reentry?
What was I thinking about reentry? Um, I mean, I knew I had the halfway house ahead of me. I had
Yeah.
9 months in the halfway house.
There's nothing good about the halfway house either. And
Nothing
because
good, but for me, 1,000 times better than being in prison.
you're out.
You're out at work, you come home, you come home, you're tired, you grab your phone, you sit in your bed, you watch a movie. This little iPhone, it felt like I was watching the biggest screen on earth,
Oh yeah, different world. Yeah.
right? So for me, I felt like the halfway house was going to be another hurdle that I had to jump over. So I wasn't thinking a whole lot about my career and finances. I was thinking, okay, this is the next hurdle, but this is a positive step and it's going to be better. And it was.
Mhm.
And then I got moved to home confinement for 3 months. So even at home, I felt like I really tried hard not to bite off more than I can chew for a while.
What year was it that you got into home confinement?
2021.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, at this point right now where I'm at, I'm very, very uh, ready to go. Very, very motivated. I've taken, it's been years,
Yeah.
and thank God, I
Well, I
went
mean,
to.
I think eventually you go through a 10-year span.
Mhm.
It's the way I look at it. I feel like, I was 40 when it happened. I was 50 when I came out. Um, it took a little bit of while for the reentry because you just, I mean, you talked about it, just being in certain situations, it feels a little bit different. And the weird thing about Alec, I mean, you and I are just sitting here talking about this, but, it's weird because you can't really talk too much to people about it because they think that you should be so excited about being out of prison, and you are. It's like coming down as a 5-year-old, seeing all your toys times 1,000, but you've got all these other things running through your mind. How am I fitting back into the family? Who's paying the bills? How do I get a job? Am I going to get a job? How are my family? How's my friends treating me? How's this and that and that? You've got all these things just like running through, and it's like jumping into a moving car. But on the outside, you're trying to act like I'm just Brent,
Happy
just act that I'm back.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
inside, you're like, man, I hope I can fit it back into all this because I feel a little bit like I got some sea legs here.
100%. And you're not the same, at least for me, you're not the same person either.
No, and you
So you,
can't be the same person
right.
because it is who you are now.
It's who you are now. So you have to adjust to your new self and then figure out how that's going to play into all of the elements that you just talked about. I mean, yeah, my kids need me, you know. I didn't make money for a while, and my excuse is I'm not going to not make, I need to support, my responsibilities don't go away. But you're right. Everybody. I mean, I even some really good friends, like they don't want to hear you complain. So you don't complain.
You
Don't
don't
complain.
complain.
You just do what you got to do. I mean, for me, the 4 years after I was indicted before going to the prison, if that wasn't walking through the motions with a smile on my face, like
Oh yeah.
if I could do that, then now, this is
I
not.
had a good friend of mine that had gone through the same thing that I was going through, and he was telling me as I was going through it advice, and he said, Brent, you suit up, show up, and shut up. He said,
Right.
suiting up means that you're there. Um, Showing up means it must not be as bad as everybody thinks, and you shut up because they don't want to hear about your stuff.
Yeah, that's strong. I like it.
But it was really strong. It was like strong medicine because you don't think that, but I think in essence it kind of works. Um, and people obviously are close to you. You can talk to them about whatever, but in the general sense. So Alec, where you are now, and you haven't been somebody that's been hidden. You're out, you're about, and what's your world like now?
It's a hybrid. I got a girlfriend. We live together. That's really nice.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to work all day and then have something to come home to.
Yep.
I got my two kids, but I work a a 9 to 5, 6 day a week job in a cubicle. Phone
Hmm.
sales. Um, I make a good living. I'm very I cannot
I'm sure
complain
you're good at that.
because I'm good at it. I mean, God gave me a couple of gifts. There's a lot. I got a lot of weaknesses, but there's a couple of things that I'm good at.
Well, I think that you bring up a good point too. You can put a sales guy in a cubicle, but if he has really good sales experience, he can outlap anybody around. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were talking about making phone calls, and I said, if you're making a cold call, I said, apologize to him first. I said, they said, well, I don't understand what you're saying, Brent. I said, well, it's kind of like this. I said, when I was 15 years old, I was told by my dad I need to make these appointments for these salespeople. So I would call and I'd say, hey, Alec, This is Brent Cassidy. I'm calling from Pennington Funeral Home. I want to apologize to you. I was supposed to get some information out to you yesterday and just ran out of time. What would be a good time to get that to you?
Right.
So I never asked them if it was okay to bring the information by. I apologized to them and it confused them. It totally
Of course.
confused. So I'm late now.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
my point is, Alec, is that you can't confuse a good sales guy, because a good sales guy always has it in his brain of what works. You just parachute him down, and he will figure out the lay of the land, because certain things work.
Yeah, you have to adapt. You have to be a chameleon. You have to mirror. You have to understand these people's social style, what they take. I mean, my experience through the years of having to, people say closing is the most important part of sales, but for me, I'm not debating that, but for me, targeting is right there with it. Because the way I do my business, and I've done it my whole life, 98% of my time, money, and resources goes to 2% of my customer base.
Mm.
So that 80-20 rule has never applied to me. But
No,
again,
you have a 2% rule.
it's the extremist in me. I know I'm going to get more from that 2% if I do it right than I'll ever get from 20%. But if I choose the wrong 2%, then I kill myself,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I like where you're at right now, and I like that you're getting out, and I don't know what this Pain Hustlers is going to be, but I think Alec, the more that you can get out and tell your story, be the person you are, that you're a real person that went through this and how you went through it, is a good thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that. I mean, the movie's coming out. Yeah, I heard for years, oh, they might make a movie on the Insys story. 9 times out of 10, those never come to fruition. So I'm thinking, I'm not worried.
This really
Um,
happened.
yeah, I mean, this guy Evan Hughes is a phenomenal author. He wrote the book on the story. I
Yeah.
worked extensively with him. I mean, hours and hours, days and days. And he wrote an accurate story. But the movie, it's a movie.
It's a movie.
And
Yeah.
they made it crystal clear to him that, I
I
don't
got to
know.
ask you though, Alec,
Yeah.
the Emily Blunt person that it's in the description,
Yeah.
is that a real person that came through as a female that was having a hard time?
I think she's a combination of a few.
Okay.
And I think that the lead, Chris Evans, is also a combination of a few of the key players.
Yeah.
So there'll be parts where I'll watch and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's I can kind of see me in there, and there'll be other parts where I'll be like, that's
No way. Yeah.
100% not me in any way, shape, or form. It's
Yeah.
loosely based on the Insys film, but the fact that they are even acknowledging that, uh, it concerns me, because the message that I'm trying to get out there is the exact opposite message of what that movie will entail. But again, it's a movie. I don't blame
It's a
anybody.
movie.
Their job is to put people in seats and keep them in seats. I've got to keep that in perspective and just continue to go on with my life,
And you'll survive it.
Yeah.
Because of what you're doing, how you're doing it. And people want to listen to you, Alec. You've got a story to tell, fascinating story to tell. And you have a lot of life experience to share to people. And I as far as people getting I want to ask you too, before I get to that, going through what you've gone through, living what you've lived, what do you think is your biggest takeaway from where you sit right now? It could be a couple of different things.
Biggest takeaway is, it is so counterproductive to try to spend your energy pleasing others.
That's huge.
Um, you want to be good to others, right?
Yeah.
You want to take care of others. You want to, especially the people that love you, but pleasing others, that's a character flaw. That's an insinuation of something that you're lacking, right? And you're trying to
Enabling.
up for that, right? By pleasing others and getting it from somebody else, when it's got to come from within.
You got to fill yourself up.
Yeah. And if you have that inner confidence, the decisions you make will be yours and yours alone. At least you know that they won't be influenced by anybody else.
I think that is a huge life lesson. You got to fill yourself up, thinking you're going to get your filled up from other people.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Good advice. Alec, if people want to get a hold of you, I've got Limitless. Let's see what I just do with that.
That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Limitless at A Burlakoff. That's BURLAKOFF.com.
Yep.
I think you're doing coaching, right?
Yeah, I do coaching. I'm available. I work long hours. I mean, all weekend, 6 to 9 every night.
Yeah.
I have a couple consulting jobs that I like. I like to take the smaller companies. I don't want a huge sales force
Yeah.
because that's going to bring me back to PTSD of what I
You've
did
been
for.
in that world,
I'm
right?
looking for like a sales force of like 5 to 8. You
Yeah.
know,
Build them up.
yeah, something manageable you can really keep your eye on. Um, and then I love the speaking. For me, that's like what we talked about earlier in the conversation. The opportunity to get up there and demand attention and create action and influence others.
Yeah. I think that's the looking at your life. That's one of the things that you've done, Alec, and that's what you're going to be seeing you do now is taking action. Don't be afraid to try, take action with it, and things happen with that. Perfection is never born. You just evolve, and just taking action is where you got to start.
I agree.
Let's see. So I want to send people to your book too, Selling Hard Lessons Learned, Amazon. Hey, if you want another book, I've got one. So Nightmare Success. You can go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble. For everybody, if you got anything out of this, and I know you did, please go to Spotify, leave a review. Apple, leave a review. It puts the show on steroids. I don't know what they do with the algorithm when those reviews hit. They just keep pushing them up. BrentCassidy.com. Check me out there. Got all my stuff. My daughter Courtney keeps me up to date and updating that. I wish I was smart enough to do it myself. And as I used to say when I was writing my emails back and forth from prison, stay strong. I'll do the same. Alec, really appreciate you today, man.
My pleasure, Brent. I really enjoyed the conversation. It was a pleasure.
Me too. Nightmare Success, in and out.
All right.